Hi, I'm Kelly Dennings, a campaigner at the Center for Biological Diversity. As part of our work to stop the wildlife extinction crisis, we raise awareness around the need for voluntary, rights-based family planning. We support every person's right to have children if and when they're ready. But even when people have access to contraception, the decision to have or not have children is anything but simple. That's why I'm excited to talk with Maxine about her new film, To Kid or Not to Kid. Good morning, Maxine.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for talking to me. It's really exciting to be with you and CBD. So you're exactly the organization that I think kind of gets it, gets the idea of the film.
Awesome. Well, we're so excited to have you. So the movie To Kid or Not to Kid follows the personal story of your family planning journey. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. It's interesting. It wasn't exactly the film I expected to make. And I only say that meaning that it became exceptionally personal and intimate. And there probably would be things I wouldn't put on camera if I was making a different film on a different topic. But I actually realized in the making of the film that I was holding back a lot. And I set out making a film where I was going around and interviewing people about their own decisions. And as I was making it, it just didn't feel like it was engaging enough for people. It was very kind of dry and scientific, which isn't bad, but it wasn't really telling a story. And I always know that in my career of being a filmmaker, making people feel and understanding a decision and really being with somebody as they're going through a process and feeling a transformation can really help somebody engage with the subject matter. And so it evolved in the making of the film. And yeah, became my journey. And it does focus on other people's journeys too, for sure.
So the rationale for being child-free is really varied and multifaceted. Some people are concerned about financially supporting a child. Others like the lifestyle they're afforded by not having children. You know, many are not interested in the birthing experience or the associated changes with their body. And increasingly, people are concerned about the environment. And really, that environmental rationale can be twofold. You know, some feel uncertain about the planet their children would inherit. You're probably familiar with a recent poll that found 30% of Americans agree that a couple should consider the negative and potentially life-threatening effects of climate change when deciding whether or not to have children. But, you know, others are worried about the impact that their children would have on a planet that's already feeling the pressure of 8 billion people. So, Maxine, when you were talking to the others about their rationale for being child-free, what was your experience in how people talked about the environmental concerns related to family planning?
You know, I love that you already bring up so many different decisions because I don't think people really know the process that it can take for people to decide not to have children. And I think that's what really the film highlights is how thoughtful people quite often are when they're deciding not to have children. I mean, after all, we've got to be super careful with our family planning. And, you know, the truth of the matter is as well that it's estimated around 45% of people actually have unplanned pregnancies. 45% of pregnancies are unplanned, which is a huge figure. And, you know, we totally know accidents happen. And, you know, in that kind of situation, you know, that's another film. But it really, to your point, it really, really runs the gamut of how many different decisions people might be making. I mean, for me, it absolutely was environmental. That was a big part of my decision, but it was also me as a woman and my identity as well. You know, what did I want to do with my life? What would make me happy? And I really think that's an important decision that people don't necessarily sit down and really engage with enough. Like, this is a hugely responsible job. We see so many articles right now about how difficult it is to have the child in the home as well as do a full-time job, as well as being looking after the house and cooking, etc., etc. So that was a really big part of my decision as well. But you're absolutely right. You know, it runs from financial to environmental to whether people enjoy being around children, which is also fine. If people are saying, you know what, I don't know whether I would actually be a good parent, whether I actually want to be, you know, whether I have the patience for it, whether I'd have the joy for it. So it really is, this is why I'm so thrilled about making this film, because there wasn't a film like this out there for me, watching somebody going through the process. Because like I said, it can be a big process for a lot of people.
Yeah, I want to talk about that process a little bit later, but kind of continuing down this idea of the environmental side of things. So from Project Drawdown to a letter signed last year by more than 11,000 scientists, you know, family planning has been identified by experts as a climate solution. When the connection between family planet and climate can be a controversial one, though. So, you know, what are your thoughts on navigating the sensitivity of, you know, this child-free lifestyle as a climate issue?
You know, it's fascinating to talk about that because, you know, there are a number of moments in the film where I do bring it up. But I definitely didn't want my film to be preachy. You know, we all have different passions in life and different concerns. And maybe for somebody who's watching the film, they, you know, politics and making sure people vote might be their hugest passion in life. And they're doing a great job and giving up a lot of hours. And I didn't want to feel, I wanted people to come to a realization for themselves watching the film and have it as a point of like, gosh, yeah, I've never really thought actually that if everyone around the world gave birth like an American, we would need 4 planets to feed them all because of how much we consume in America. So it's no surprise that people find it complicated in as much as what's the right solution, because you know, solving climate change is going to take many different solutions, but getting access to people that don't want children, allowing them to have access to contraception is a huge one, because it's also making sure that people aren't brought into the world that aren't actually wanted. And for me, that's kind of the biggest deal on my heart, is I want to make sure every single person is born into a loving family. And I didn't feel my child would be born into a loving family if I was going to be the mother. And that might sound controversial, but it really, there are plenty of people. I made films about foster care and, you know, talk about those experiences. So people, if they want to have kids and know that that's their heart's desire, you know, good for you. And also good for me to know that my heart's desire wasn't to have a child.
Right. So in the work and the interviews that you did, and knowing that people come from a varied, you know, background as to why they choose to be child-free, do you think they were making this connection, you know, relating family planning to other environmental issues, and specifically the wildlife extinction crisis, which is what the center works on? You know, how do you think that plays out in people's minds, the folks that you talk to?
You know, what I love is actually the youth movement and everything that the generation after me are really being vocal about. You know, like almost kind of saying to us, gosh, what have you done? You know, like, look what we're doing and you haven't done that. And I love that, because I think for a lot of people, you know, for those of us that absolutely have the awareness of the earth and the supplies, you know, not forget about wildlife extinction, even feeding the amount of people that are on the earth right now. So everything kind of folds into each other. Like I remember going to a wonderful film screening once and being at this fantastic panel, and actually one of the founders of Greenpeace talking about the fact that people are part of nature. And I think what people don't always think about, and we need to be better at, and I think the youth movement coming after us are much better at, is kind of making us understand that it's not a them and us world. We are part of the ecosystem, and if we don't get woken to the fact that our decisions are making such a dramatic effect on the world, then how can I don't understand how people don't get that. So it was an enlightening moment for me, and I think people are getting more enlightened. You know, I hate talking about education, or, you know, I don't like using dry terminologies. I think through telling stories, we can really appeal to people and get people to think differently, because art can really open some of those doors.
Well, that was one of my questions is, you know, how do we get these narratives out there to let people know about this interconnection between environmental and health issues? And clearly your movie, storytelling, you know, all great ideas. And that's one of the things that the center is always looking for, is campaigns and interventions that we can, you know, deploy to help people understand this connection. So any other thoughts or ideas, let us know. But that's one of the reasons why we love to talk with you and you know, share this movie. So
I mean, it's no surprise that politicians bring people onto the stage to tell their story that's emotive and personal and, you know, affects people's hearts. And what has been delightful for me, and I'm going to get a little film nerdy now, because it's wonderful. Like, in this world where, you know, marketing drives so much, still word of mouth is the best marketing tool. So, and this is still true for films. Like the fact that people can watch this film and say, oh my goodness, did you see this film about this woman? And, you know, deciding whether she wanted a child or not, like, you've got to watch it. And that's already been happening in a big way. And that's the best way of getting people to raise awareness, to share stories. It's just telling each other, which is kind of awesome.
Well, yeah, and when you think about, you know, the history of, you know, passing down stories, especially from mothers to daughters kind of thing, it does fit with that. So one of the interesting things in the movie is you differentiate between the words childless and child-free. So how do you think the use of one term versus the other affects people, particularly those who are trying to find acceptance in their decision to not have children?
I love that you've asked this question, because to be really honest, I didn't know the difference when I started making the film. I mean, a big secret here, probably not a big secret to many of you that watch a lot of documentaries, but most documentary makers make films to explore a topic that they want to know much more about, right? It's their curiosity that drives them. And I used to call myself childless, and I didn't realize, and to be truth, I mean, you see this very early in the film. I was told it would be very hard for me to have children, but it wouldn't be impossible. So I skirt this terminology, and I think it does make the film actually a lot broader because of that. But for my childless sisters and brothers, it means when you can't have children. And there is a huge grief process for a lot of people that are experiencing that. And I've just made this wonderful short spin-off series actually for PBS that's available now, that people can just go onto YouTube, look for Should We Kid or Not. And one of the episodes that I really loved was about a woman who'd been through an incredible situation with IVF treatments, you know, financially, emotionally. And she finally comes to the point where she says, no more. That's it. I'm not doing it anymore. But the acceptance that she could actually say no was really hard for her from the IVF community, because IVF is also driven by, you know, there's a lot of money in like IVF treatments, etc. And we should just look at some of that as to where these pressures are coming from. And I think we touch on that not only in the PBS spin-off series, but in the film too. Like, again, just be alert to where the cultural pressures are coming from. And there's a big business behind having kids.
Yeah, we are huge fans of the PBS work.
Thank you.
It's short snippets that, you know, you can really digest, but it's one of those things where I've always wanted to put these two people in a room together to do this. It was fascinating.
I mean, hey, I did it because I wanted it exactly that, Kelly, right? The debate that goes on between the two people from across the aisle. And I loved it because a lot of the two characters that were debating the issue, you know, if I could have run the camera on the green room afterwards, they just wouldn't stop talking. But at the beginning, they really didn't know how to reach each other. And then by the end, they were best of friends. So it just goes to show like what, again, talking, storytelling can do to really get us to understand where everybody's coming from on these subjects.
There's a laundry list of topics that we could do that with, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you're, again, kind of with your personal story, you shared that you were, you know, somewhat ambivalent for years in wanting children. I don't think I'm putting words in your mouth there. And it can really be hard for people to choose not to have children or even talk about not having them. And your movie really just kind of helps open up this conversation with people. And we talk about that a lot, just, you know, having these hard, stigmatized, taboo topics about the number of kids and, you know, contraceptive methods and how you're going to do that. Are there any, you know, words of advice that you would have for the center on how to increase the acceptance and, you know, increasing the acceptance of these conversations, whether that's, you know, the number of children or to be child free, and, you know, help bring these conversations out of, you know, the places where everyone's afraid to talk about them?
Well, I think you're doing one of the things I would suggest, which is actually interviewing me about the film, because honestly, you know, when we ran our Kickstarter a few years ago, we offered a free link to the film to anybody who was putting so much pressure on you to have children. And it would just arrive in your inbox to the person anonymously. They wouldn't know where the film had come from. But it really, truthfully, the whole reason for making the film, not just a topic that I wanted to explore, but to really break this taboo about talking about it. And I'm really, really hopeful. I've already seen it change. People come up to me after at film festivals saying, you know, I couldn't tell anybody I wasn't coming to see this film. And now I feel after seeing this film, I can talk to people about it. I feel encouraged and I feel brave. And actually, you know, talk to people about it, because I think you'll find a lot more acceptance now than you ever did. I think, like, let's find our voice. Let's talk to people, like, just in a kind of like casual, let's take all this weight away from I might be going through IVF, to B, do I even want a kid? Because I think there's this assumption that everybody wants children, and that's not the case. 20 to 25% of us will not want children. So this should be a much more casual, you know, over a drink kind of conversation. You know, I don't think I'm gonna have kids, like, you know. And actually what's been really delightful is the amount of parents that have really, really enjoyed the film, because it hasn't always been an easy journey for them, and it allows them this a door to open for them where they can actually say, you know, it's been really, really hard for us to be parents. And that has been delightful. I kind of feel honored that those parents have kind of come out to me, because they've said, I haven't been able to feel, I don't feel I can talk to people about how hard it's been for me to be a parent.
Yeah, I also think there needs to be like a support group for the non-grandparents, the people that, you know, by, you know, somebody choosing not to have a child then doesn't get to be a grandparent.
Yeah.
Another story.
Yeah, but again, not all parents want to be grandparents. Like, we make these assumptions, and not all parents, you know, they've done their job. They're like, I also don't want to necessarily have to babysit all the time for the grad. You know, who knows?
Yeah.
Let's just break some of those assumptions. And so, yeah, it really, again, in answer to your question, let's just talk about it. Let's, like, say I've seen a film, or there's, you know, because there's more and more books now. There weren't as many books when I first started making this film in 2013. There were a couple, and I really implore anybody that is trying to come through this decision to also read these books. One that there's two that I would love to suggest, and they're on my website under the resources. One's called The Baby Matrix by Laura Carroll, and the other one's called The Baby Boon by Eleanor Burkett. And those were kind of the two books that I read right at the beginning. And now there are more books out there too. So there's more, we're starting to see more articles about this, which also makes me really excited.
It is. It's hard to change culture and, you know, years of the way it's always been. So, to pivot here just a smidge, and you did talk about this at the beginning, and I wanted to come back to it. So, you know, the center's work is really grounded in the belief that every person should have the right to choose if and when they want to have children and how many, right? And simply ensuring that every individual has the resources, access to contraception, education to plan their reproductive futures can help, as you said, prevent unintended pregnancies, you know, improves the lives of children and parents, and it protects the environment. But it is not always easy for people to get the reproductive health care that they want or need. You know, Maxine, your film really explores a number of these challenges and doubts that people face when it comes to making these contraceptive decisions that's right for them. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and the stories that you had in the movie?
Sure. I mean, I still find it unbelievable that we're in the 21st century and there's only two options of contraception for men. Either vasectomy or you use a condom. And I know that there have been many, many trials about having a patch or a cream or a gel for a man. Those trials stopped because of the side effects, let alone, you know, let's ignore the fact that women have been suffering from these side effects for years and years. So we were delighted to have a partnership with the Male Contraceptive Initiative, who are trying to develop and help with research for other contraceptive methods for men. But also what we've been delighted about is we're starting to take the film to those who treat us. So we screened at a psychologist conference. We're trying, as soon as conferences are back up and running, we were about to screen at OBGYN conferences, primary care physician conferences, because those are the people actually that really need to understand that not every woman and every man want to have a child. And when you go and have your gynecology examination, there should be the acceptance, and that's not always seen, that, listen, I'm not wanting to have a child. How can I be treated long-term if I'm thinking I'm not going to have children? And if I want to do something quite significant earlier, do I want a tubal ligation, i.e. having your tubes tied? Can that be a consideration earlier on in your life and not having to ask if you have a husband, will you change your mind, etc., etc. So that does need to change. And I'm really excited that our film was beginning to get out there and will continue to.
I think that is so important. And we have talked about that there is like the physical side and the mental side, right? So you do need to be at the OBGYNs, but also with the psychiatrists and psychologists. So kudos for getting it out there.
Thank you.
So one of our goals is to reduce the stigma about talking about family planning, which has been kind of the through line with all of this interview. So, you know, for example, we have our endangered species condoms, which we think are really a fun icebreaker to encourage to have these conversations. And you have lots of these discussions throughout the movie, and, you know, really even turning the camera on you and your husband. So this gets a little bit more personal. Do you think your journey may have been different if you and your husband had talked about the number of children each of you wanted before getting married?
Yes. I mean, when I talk about the film after people have seen it, I say, watch the film, learn by my mistakes. Like, you know, don't get into a very committed partnership without having talked about whether you want children or not. You know, but surprisingly enough, for those of us that are ambivalent, it's not uncommon. You know, I hear from people through our social media. Our social media is very, very active, and we love hearing from audiences or people that are still on their journey. And it's no surprise for those that are ambivalent that haven't had the language or know how to talk about not having children. there are actually many, many people that are very vocal, and I hats off to them, because I think people are finding their voices and finding language now. I've seen the change in 6 years, and we're seeing more and more of a change, again, as the youth movement are coming behind us, and people are feeling much more, you know, I don't think the fact we've had to fight a little bit in the US to get access to free contraception isn't something that's lost on this conversation. And so, yes, do have those conversations. Watch this film together as a couple. People have asked, when can I get this film? Because I need to watch it with my partner. And, you know, we may be talking about heterosexual couples here a little bit, but again, my PBS series also brings in much more of the dynamic for LGBTQ couples too, because it's also a conversation, you know, there may be assumption that they won't have kids, but maybe they do want to have kids. Have that conversation as well with your, you know, partner that may be, you know, partner that you're going to be committed to for a significant amount of time.
Totally agree. I mean, all of this really is just to be open and aware and, you know, willing to come to the table in a very truthful and open manner, right? Whether it's the, you know, the other partner who's trying to express their feelings or vice versa. And they are hard conversations. They really are. Well, anyway, we've talked about the PBS series, but, you know, so now tell us how can we watch, you know, the movie To Kid or Not to Kid?
We've got some really, really exciting news that's just happened literally in the last week. Unfortunately, we were going to have a wonderful theatrical release in the UK, where I'm from. We've released already in America, which is really exciting. The press has been amazing about the film. And we had to cancel our worldwide release that was meant to happen in the week of Earth Day. And so we've managed to pivot, and now we're going to have a really fantastic event in June where we're going to release the film worldwide. So anybody that's out of the States that might be watching this film will be coming to you, but it is available already now in the States and North America on Amazon Prime. So do watch it and let us know what you think.
Awesome. Well, we hope that everybody that, you know, is watching this and is interested in this topic and the intersection between family planning and the environment takes the time to watch this movie. Thank you so much, Maxine, for joining us.
And thank you for inviting us. And I think the work that you're doing at CBD is fantastic. So it's been a delight to come together with you and have an interview with you in this way. And I look forward to working with you more.
Thank you. Thank you so much.